The morning my son asked me to sign away my house and my pride in the same breath, I finally understood what silence had been costing me. I had spent most of my life being the steady man in the room. Not loud, not dramatic, not the kind of father who slammed doors or made speeches at dinner tables. Just steady. And steady people, family, are easy to mistake for available. Available to forgive. Available to rescue. Available to be used. My name is Earl Whitaker. I was 68 years old then, living in the same brick ranch on Laurel Bend Road outside Knoxville, Tennessee, where my wife and I raised our only boy. The house wasn't fancy, but it was paid for. Every board in the back deck had been replaced by my own hands. Every tree in the yard had a memory under it. My late wife, Helen, planted the dogwood by the mailbox. The spring Miles learned to ride a bike. The kitchen still caught the morning light the same way it had when she stood there making biscuits in her robe, humming gospel songs under her breath. I had been alone in that house for 6 years, but I was not lonely. There's a difference. Lonely is when you need somebody to come fill the air. Alone is when you finally hear what the air has been trying to tell you. That Thanksgiving, I drove to my son's place carrying a pecan pie, a bottle of cider, and a folder of papers I wished to God I didn't have to bring. Miles lived 20 minutes away in Farragut, in a house with black shutters, a wide porch, and a driveway full of things that looked expensive before you even knew what they were. His wife, Tessa, liked everything polished. Polished floors, polished countertops, polished smiles. Even the wreath on their front door looked like it had been arranged by someone afraid of leaves falling in the wrong direction. Miles opened the door before I rang the bell. "Dad," he said, and for a second I saw my boy. The same crooked smile he had when he was 12, and pretending he hadn't broken the garage window with a baseball. "Happy Thanksgiving, son." He hugged me, but there was tension in his shoulders. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing was Tessa standing behind him, one hand on her hip, the other holding a wine glass, though it wasn't even noon yet. "Earl," she said, "you made it." The way she said it made it sound like I had arrived late to a meeting where I wasn't expected to contribute. I said I would. She smiled, not warmly. Tessa's smiles always seemed to arrive a half second before her feelings did, like they were trained. Their dining room table was already set. White plates, gold napkin rings, candles that smelled like cinnamon and money. Miles had deep-fried a turkey in the backyard, which made him proud because he had watched 3 videos and now considered himself an expert. Tessa had ordered most of the sides from a catering place and moved them into glass dishes so nobody would know. I knew. I didn't care. Food is food when folks sit together in peace. But there wasn't much peace in that room. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about safe things, the weather, the vols, a neighbor's new fence. Miles told me about a client who was slow to pay. Tessa mentioned, twice, that the real estate market was tightening up. Then she brought it where she had always meant to bring it. "So, Earl," she said, placing her fork down just carefully enough for me to notice. "Did Miles tell you we're finally moving forward with the lakeside property?" I looked at my son. "He mentioned you were interested." "Interested?" Tessa laughed softly. "We're past interested. We're under review." Miles took a drink of water. "Too much water." "What kind of review?" I asked. Tessa leaned back. "Financing, partnership, expansion. The usual grown-up parts of building something real." Something real. That was one of her phrases. As if the hardware store I ran for 36 years before selling it wasn't real. As if my paid-off house wasn't real. As if raising a son through his mother's cancer and burying the woman I loved wasn't real. Miles cleared his throat. "It's a senior wellness center, Dad. Not a nursing home. More like day programs, physical therapy, meals, community stuff. There's a need for it." "That sounds useful," I said. "It is useful," Tessa said quickly. "And profitable. If we close now, before another group gets the property, we'll be set for life." There it was. Set for life. People say that when what they really mean is somebody else needs to take the risk first. I took a bite of turkey. It was a little dry. I chewed slowly. "And how are you financing it?" Miles looked down at his plate. Tessa looked straight at me. "With family support," she said. The room got smaller. I set my fork down. "What does that mean?" Miles finally looked up. "Dad, before you react, Just hear us out. Those words will chill a father if he has lived long enough. Before you react, just hear us out. It means somebody has already done something they know requires forgiveness. Tessa reached toward the sideboard and picked up a slim blue folder. She slid it across the table toward me, like a server presenting a dessert menu. All we need today, she said, is your signature on the clean copy. I didn't open it right away. What clean copy? Miles said. The guarantor form. I looked at him. For what? For the bridge financing, Tessa said. It's temporary. 90 days, maybe 120. Your house has enough equity to satisfy the lender's condition, and once the investor funds come in, you're released. My house. The words landed on the table heavier than any dish sitting there. I looked at my son, not his wife. Miles. He swallowed. It's not like you're giving us the house. No, I said. It's like I'm risking it. Tessa sighed, and there was that small flash of irritation she showed when someone failed to follow the script she had written for them. Earl, with respect, you are sitting on an asset you barely use. We're trying to build something that could carry this family forward. With respect, I said, don't call my home an asset at my wife's Thanksgiving table. It wasn't Helen's table anymore. I knew that. It was Tessa's table, bought from some catalog with a French name. But in my mind, Thanksgiving belonged to Helen. Always would. Miles rubbed his forehead. Dad, please. We're not trying to take anything from you. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my own folder. Plain manila. Nothing polished about it. I placed it beside Tessa's blue one. I got a call 11 days ago, I said. From Leland Price at Volunteer First Credit Union. Miles went still. Tessa's eyes narrowed. Leland and I served on the church finance committee together for 15 years, I continued. He called because a guarantor document came across his desk with my name on it, my full legal name, my social security number, my address, and a signature that looked enough like mine to fool somebody who didn't know my hand shakes a little more than it used to. The dining room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator somewhere down the hall. Tessa's face changed first. Not fear, exactly. Calculation. Miles whispered, Dad. I opened my folder and pulled out the copy Leland had sent me. This was submitted with the preliminary package 3 weeks ago. Tessa said, that was not final. I looked at her. It had my signature. It was a placeholder. A forged signature is not a placeholder. Miles pushed his chair back slightly. Nobody was trying to hurt you. That one hurt more than it should have. Because he didn't say nobody did it. He said nobody was trying to hurt me. I turned to him. Did you know? He didn't answer. A father can survive almost anything except watching his grown child search for a lie and come up empty. Tessa leaned forward. Miles believed you would support him once you understood the opportunity. We all know you're cautious, sometimes too cautious. We were trying to keep momentum. By signing my name? By preparing documents ahead of time. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because bad excuses can be insulting enough to become comedy. I said, I want my name removed from every file. I want written confirmation from the credit union, the private lender, and whoever else has seen that paperwork. And I want it done today. Tessa's voice sharpened. Today is Thanksgiving. You chose the holiday, not me. Miles stood up. Dad, sit down. Please. I am sitting. No, I mean don't do this. Not here. Not now. I looked around the room. The candles were still burning. The turkey was drying on the platter. My pecan pie sat unopened on the sideboard. Everything looked like family from a distance. Then Tessa picked up her glass and said, Maybe this is why Miles never asks you for anything. Because you make him feel like a thief for wanting more than a quiet little life. Miles flinched, but he didn't correct her. That was when I knew he had been letting her talk about me that way for a long time. I looked at my son. Is that what you think? His face twisted. Guilt and anger, fighting for the same space. I think you don't understand what pressure feels like anymore. You paid off your house when houses were cheap. You sold your business before everything got impossible. You sit over there with no mortgage, no kids at home, no risk, and you judge me like I'm failing because I need help. I have helped you. Not like this. No, I said. Not like this. Tessa stood now, too. Miles, enough. He wants control. That's what this is. He wants to keep you small so he can still feel needed. The words were hers, but Miles did not send them back. Instead, he looked at me with wet eyes and a hard mouth, and said the sentence I still hear sometimes when the house gets too quiet. Sign the form and apologize to my wife, or don't call yourself my father anymore. There are moments in a man's life when sound leaves the room. You can see people moving. You can see mouths close, candles flicker, curtains breathe near a window. But sound disappears, like the world is giving you the courtesy of silence while something inside you breaks cleanly. I looked at my son, the boy I taught to bait a hook, the teenager I bailed out after he backed my truck into a mailbox, the young man who cried into my shirt at his mother's funeral and said he didn't know how to live without her. And I saw him standing next to a woman who had convinced him that love meant leverage. Tessa's mouth curved just a little. She thought she had won. She thought I would do what I had always done. Swallow the insult. Sign the paper. Protect Miles from the fall. Keep the peace, because fathers are expected to bleed quietly. I stood up. My knees took a second, but my voice did not. I looked at Miles and said 5 words. Let the truth collect interest. Then I picked up my coat, left the blue folder on the table, took my pecan pie from the sideboard, and walked out. Nobody followed me to the door. I drove home through a Thanksgiving afternoon that looked too pretty for what had just happened. Families were tossing footballs in yards. Smoke rose from grills. Kids chased cousins across brown grass. I passed a church sign that said, "Give thanks in all things," and I almost pulled over because I was not sure what to do with that. At home, I placed the pecan pie on my kitchen counter and stood there looking at it. Helen's recipe. Miles used to eat 2 slices and ask for a third with ice cream. I had made it that morning because some part of me still believed food could remind people who they used to be. I sat at the kitchen table for a long while, not crying, not yet. I kept seeing Miles at 9 years old, asleep on the couch with a baseball glove on his chest. Miles at 16, pretending not to be scared before his driving test. Miles at 32, standing beside his mother's grave, holding my hand so tight my fingers ached. Then I saw him at that dining table, telling me to sign away my security or give up the name father. That was the thing about adult children. They could still find the exact spot where you were softest. They knew because they had lived there. Around 6 that evening, I opened my folder again. I read every page slowly. Leland had sent more than the guarantor form. He had sent the preliminary loan summary, the collateral schedule, and a copy of an email from Tessa to the lending broker. Earl has agreed in principle. Signature attached for underwriting purposes. Agreed in principle. That phrase sat in my mouth like rust. I had agreed to nothing. I had been asked nothing. And yet my name had already gone places I had not gone, promised things I had not promised, and stood behind risks I had not accepted. At 7:12, my phone buzzed. Miles. I let it ring. At 7:19, he texted, "Dad, please don't make this bigger than it is." That was the first time I understood he still thought the danger was my reaction, not his decision. I turned the phone face down and went to bed early. I did not sleep much, but I rested. Sometimes rest is not sleep. Sometimes rest is deciding you will no longer argue with people committed to misunderstanding you. Friday morning I got up before dawn, made coffee, and put on my old charcoal suit. It had hung in the closet since Helen's funeral, except for weddings and one bad winter when I needed the wool coat behind it. It fit looser than it used to. Age had taken weight from my shoulders, but not from my memory. I shaved carefully, polished my shoes. Not because I was going to court, not because I wanted to impress anybody, but because some truths deserve to be delivered by a man standing straight. At 8:05, I called Leland Price. He answered in that careful voice people use when they know a family matter has become a legal one. "Earl." "Morning, Leland. I'm ready to put it in writing." He exhaled. "I was hoping you would. I want to state clearly that I did not authorize my signature, did not agree to act as guarantor, and did not consent to my property being listed as collateral. That's what needs to happen. I also want the loan package frozen until the source of that signature is investigated." There was a pause. You understand what that will do to Miles's deal. I looked out the kitchen window at Helen's dogwood. Most of the leaves had already fallen. I understand what Miles did to my name. Leland was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Bring the statement in. I'll walk it to compliance myself." By 9:30, I was at the credit union. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. A young teller smiled at me without knowing she was watching a man choose between old habits and self-respect. Leland met me near the offices. He was 71, tall, thin, with silver hair, and the kind of eyes that had read too many financial disasters before breakfast. He shook my hand with both of his. "I'm sorry," he said. "Me too." He led me into a conference room. I signed 3 copies of my statement. He notarized them. Then he slid a separate form across the table. "This is an affidavit of non-consent regarding the signature." I read every word. I signed that too. Leland put the papers into a folder and said, "Once this enters compliance, I can't soften where it goes. I'm not asking you to." "You sure?" "No," I said, "but I'm certain. There is a difference." I left the credit union and drove home. I did not call Miles. I did not call Tessa. I did not post anything online or tell the men at church. I did not recruit sympathy. All I did was tell the truth to the people who had been handed my name like a blank check. Truth is not revenge, but people who live by lies often experience it that way. By Friday afternoon, the calls started. Tessa called first. I watched her name light up the screen and felt nothing but tired. Then Miles. Then Tessa again. Then a number I didn't recognize. Then Miles left a voicemail. "Dad, you need to call me back." The lender froze everything. "Tessa is freaking out. They're using words like fraud, Dad, fraud. I know you're upset, but this is going too far. Too far. Not forging my signature. Not attaching my home to a loan without my permission. Not asking me to apologize for discovering it. The consequence. That was too far." I deleted the voicemail without answering. Saturday morning, Leland called to tell me the private lending broker had withdrawn from the deal pending investigation. The lakeside property seller had been notified that financing was no longer verified. The investor group Tessa had bragged about wanted updated documentation and a clean guarantor package by Monday. Without that, they were out. By noon, Miles had called 6 times. By 2, Tessa sent a text. "Earl, this has been blown completely out of proportion. We need to talk like adults." I stared at that one for a while. Then I placed the phone back on the counter. At 4:30, my doorbell rang. I was in the garage sorting through a toolbox I hadn't opened since spring. I knew who it was before I reached the front door. Not because of some magic father instinct, but because desperation has a rhythm. People who come to apologize knock differently than people who come to demand. I opened the door. Miles stood on my porch, wearing yesterday's clothes. His hair was messy. His eyes were red. He looked older than 34, for the first time in his life. "Dad," he said. I did not step aside immediately. "Where's Tessa?" His mouth tightened. "At the house. Or maybe at her sister's. I don't know." I waited. "Can I come in?" I looked at my son standing beneath the porch light, and for a moment he was 6 years old again, holding a broken toy and believing I could fix anything. I stepped back. He walked into the living room like a man entering a church after doing something he wasn't ready to confess. He sat on the edge of the couch. I took the chair across from him. Helen's Bible still sat on the side table between us. Neither of us touched it. He stared at his hands. "She left." "Tessa?" He nodded. "After the broker pulled out. She started screaming. Said I ruined everything because I couldn't control you." There it was. Not convince. Not ask. Control. Miles wiped his face with both hands. "She said your house was supposed to be the bridge. That you were always going to fold, because you always do when it comes to me." I felt that one land deep. Not because it was false. Because part of it wasn't. He looked up. I hated hearing her say that. "But you didn't hate it enough before Thursday." His eyes filled. He deserved the sentence. I hated having to give it to him. "No," he said. "I didn't." The room settled around us. He said, "I knew about the first form." I did not move. He swallowed hard. "I didn't sign it." Tessa did. She had that old birthday card you sent me, the one with the check, when we were doing the kitchen renovation. She said she could copy it close enough for preliminary underwriting. I told her it was wrong. But you let it go. I told myself it wasn't final. I told myself we'd get you to sign the clean copy before anything mattered. I leaned back, looking at my son like I had never seen him before, though maybe I was only seeing him clearly for the first time in years. You planned to put me in a corner. His voice broke. Yes, that one word did more than any excuse could have. It did not fix anything, but it had weight. Truth usually does. Why? I asked. He laughed once, bitter and small. Because I was ashamed. Because I wanted to look like I knew what I was doing. Because Tessa kept saying this was our chance, and I kept hearing Mom's voice telling me not to waste my life, except it wasn't Mom's voice. It was Tessa using Mom's name when she wanted me to feel small. My jaw tightened at that, but I said nothing. She said you were comfortable while we were drowning. She said you loved your house more than your son. He looked at me. And I let myself believe some of it because believing that made it easier than admitting I was asking you to risk the last thing you and Mom built together. I looked toward the kitchen. The afternoon light was fading. The dogwood outside the window was bare now, every branch visible. Miles said, "When I told you not to call yourself my father anymore, I heard myself say it. I did. And some part of me knew I had crossed a line I might not get back across." "No," I said quietly. "You don't get back across that line." His face collapsed. I let that sit for a second, then continued. "You build a bridge somewhere else. Different materials. Slower. With inspections this time." He covered his face, and the sound he made was not the cry of a boy. It was the sound of a man finally meeting the bill for his own choices. I did not rush to comfort him. That may sound cold to some of you. Maybe it was. But I had spent 34 years stepping between Miles and every hard surface life placed in front of him. I softened consequences. I paid late bills. I made calls. I smoothed things over. I told myself it was love because that sounded better than fear. The truth was, after Helen died, I was terrified that if Miles ever got too angry with me, I would lose the last living piece of her. So I taught my son, little by little, that my boundaries were not walls. They were curtains. And Tessa had noticed. People like that always notice. Miles lowered his hands. "What happens now? With the loan? With us?" I took a breath. "The loan investigation continues. I will not withdraw my statement. I will not call Leland and say it was a misunderstanding. I will not risk my house." He nodded like each sentence was a door closing. "As for us," I said, "you are my son. That has never been up for vote. Not by you. Not by Tessa. Not by me. On my worst day. Endively," he started crying again, quieter this time. "But you will not use that word like a weapon again. You will not bring papers into my house for me to sign under pressure. You will not ask me to rescue you from a fire you helped light." "I know." "No," I said. "You are beginning to know. That is different." He nodded. "There's something else," I said. He looked up. "On Monday I'm meeting with Mr. Hanley." "Our attorney?" "My attorney. I'm moving the house into a trust. You will still inherit what I choose to leave you. But nobody will be able to borrow against this place, pressure me to sell it, or use it as collateral while I'm alive." Pain moved across his face, but this time he did not argue. "That's fair," he whispered. It was the first fair thing he had said in a long time. Miles stayed for an hour. We did not solve everything. People who tell you one conversation can repair a betrayal are usually selling something. He told me Tessa had been pushing debt from one credit card to another for months. He told me the Farragut house was more image than stability. He told me he had ignored red flags because admitting his marriage was in trouble felt like admitting he had failed at adulthood. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and looked smaller than he had when he arrived. "I'm sorry, Dad." I nodded. He waited, maybe hoping I would say it was okay. It was not okay. So I said, "I believe you're sorry. Sometimes that is the truest mercy a man can give." Sunday came quietly. I went to church, sat in the back, and listened to a sermon about gratitude that hit differently than it would have a week earlier. After service, 3 people asked about Miles, and I said he was working through some things. That was all. A father does not need to parade his child's shame to prove his own innocence. Monday morning, I met with Mr. Hanley and signed the first documents for the trust. Tuesday, Leland called again. The credit union had formally closed the application and referred the forged signature matter to their legal department. The private broker had blacklisted Tessa's Consulting LLC. The lakeside seller moved on to another buyer. Whatever dream Tessa had built out of borrowed credibility and stolen ink was gone. That afternoon, Miles came by with a cardboard box. Inside were old bank statements, loan papers, credit card bills, business plans, and the blue folder from Thanksgiving. He placed it on my kitchen table. "I thought you should have this," he said. I opened the blue folder. The clean copy was still there, waiting for the signature they had expected me to provide. My name typed neatly under a blank line. I picked up the form and tore it in half, then in half again. Miles watched, and I saw something like relief in his face. Not because the problem was solved, but because pretending was over. 2 weeks later, Tessa filed for separation. Not because she had a change of heart. People like Tessa don't leave when they feel remorse. They leave when the ladder breaks. She sent one message through Miles, saying she hoped I was happy destroying their future. I did not respond. Their future had not been destroyed by my refusal. It had been built on a forged signature and collapsed under its own weight. Miles moved into a small apartment near his job. He sold the oversized truck, picked up weekend work doing estimates for a contractor he knew, started seeing a counselor. I know that sounds neat when I say it fast, but it was not neat. He was embarrassed, angry some days, grieving others. More than once, he called and started to complain about how unfair it all felt, then stopped himself halfway through. That was growth, not perfection, just the first honest inches of it. On Christmas Eve, he came over with a store-bought pie. "Don't insult your mother's kitchen like that," I said. He looked startled, then saw me smiling. We ate soup at the kitchen table. No candles, no gold napkin rings, no performance. After dinner, he stood by the dogwood outside, hands in his coat pockets. "I thought Mom would be ashamed of me," he said. I stood beside him. "For what you did?" "Yes." He winced. "For telling the truth after?" I said, "No." He nodded, eyes on the dark branches. I said, "Your mother believed love should make a man braver, not smaller." He wiped his face and laughed under his breath. She would have liked that line. She wrote better ones. We stood there a long time. I wish I could tell you everything went back to how it was, that my son and I became close overnight, that trust returned because tears fell, that family healed because Christmas lights were glowing in the window. But real trust does not come back like a dog when you whistle. It comes back like an old cat, slow, suspicious, on its own terms. Miles still calls before he comes over. He asks before he borrows tools. He does not mention my house as an asset. He does not let anyone else mention it that way either. And me, I am still his father. That did not change when he said those words at Thanksgiving, though something else did. The old version of me, the one who believed love meant standing between my son and every consequence, did not survive that dinner. I buried that man quietly, not with anger, not with bitterness. With paperwork, a notarized statement, and a pie, I ended up eating by myself. Some folks think mercy means opening the door exactly the way it used to be. I don't believe that anymore. Mercy can be a porch light left on while the locks are changed. Mercy can be saying, "I love you," and still saying, "No." Mercy can be letting a grown child feel the ground they chose. Because if you keep catching them, they never learn how far they fell. Tessa once said I loved my house more than my son. She was wrong. I loved my son enough not to let him steal it. Love is strongest when it protects both the heart and the home. Earl did not stop loving his son when he said no. He simply stopped letting fear do the loving for him. In real families, truth can hurt at first, but it can also clear the table for respect, gratitude, and a better kind of closeness to return.